Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to let everybody connect to their audio, give them a couple minutes to get on the meeting. Good morning. Welcome to the July 16th, 2024 meeting of the Federal Secure Cloud Advisory Committee, or FSCAC. My name is Michelle White, and I'm the Designated Federal Officer, or DFO, for this advisory committee. I would like to thank all of our presenters, attendees, and stakeholders for joining us today, including those who provided public comment. Public comments submitted via the FSCAC public comment form by Monday, July 8th, have been provided to our committee members. Before we start, there are a few things that you should know. This meeting is being recorded via Zoom. The advisory committee is statutorily required under the James M. Imhoff National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2023, and thus formally established under the Federal Advisory Committee Act, or FACA, as of our charter's official filing date of February 28th, 2023. This committee is considered a federal advisory committee and is governed by the requirements under FACA. My role as the DFO is to manage the day-to-day administrative operations of the committee, attend all committee meetings, and ensure the committee operates in compliance with FACA. The duties of the committee include providing advice and recommendations to the GSA administrator, the FedRAMP board, and agencies on technical, financial, programmatic, and operational matters regarding the secure adoption of cloud computing products and services. The majority of this work, the work of the committee, will be focused around the FedRAMP Authorization Act of 2022 statutory requirements and purpose. Specifically, we are to examine the operations of FedRAMP and determine ways to authorize processes that can be continuously improved, collect information and feedback on agency compliance with and implementation of FedRAMP requirements, and serve as a forum that facilitates communication and collaboration among FedRAMP stakeholder community. I will now go ahead and go through the roll call for committee members. Please let me know if you're present by stating here. Larry Hill.
Here.
Michael Villacerca. Carlton Harris.
Here.
Thank you, Carlton. Kayla Underkoffler.
Here.
Josh Kruger.
Here.
Daniel Payne.
Here.
Marcy Womack.
Here.
Branko Boken. Matt Scholl. Bo Burles.
Here.
Lamont Yarbrough.
Here.
Nauman Ansari. Jackie Snelfer. Bill Hunt.
Here.
And Joshua Cohen.
Here.
All right, thank you all. It does look like we do have a quorum established. So I will go ahead and now review the purpose, outcomes, and agenda for today's meeting for everyone's awareness. The purpose of today's meeting is twofold. We are going to provide FSCAC with the requested FedRAMP and OMB updates, and we are going to develop an approach and plan to deliver a recommendation on FSCAC's new priorities to the GSA administrator. The outcomes of today are a shared understanding of the current status and progress towards FedRAMP's current initiatives and priorities, and a shared understanding of the current state of OMB's draft FedRAMP memo. And lastly, agreement upon the approach and timeline for finalizing our recommendations to FSCAC's priorities. Our agenda today is as follows. We are going to do the welcome and call to order, and that'll take place from 8 to 8:10. We will jump straight into the public comment until 8:20, and then some quick chair remarks until 8:25. Then we'll hear from FedRAMP regarding their updates until 9:10, followed by the committee question and answers with a hard stop of no later than 9:55. We will then go ahead and take our 15-minute break, and then we'll hear from OMB regarding updates on their draft FedRAMP memo. followed again by the committee Q&A with a hard stop at 10:50 a.m. The committee may then dive into deliberations to determine the approach and plan to deliver the new set of recommendations to the GSA administrator, and will end the day with closing remarks no later than noon. A few housekeeping items for our committee members. Please be sure to identify yourself before speaking so those listening online or reading the minutes after the meeting will know who made which comment. And this is a virtual meeting, so please make sure that your microphone is muted anytime you are not speaking. If you are not a committee member, please hold all comments until the public comment period. And again, please ensure your microphone is on mute otherwise. All right, let's go ahead and move to the comment period, or the public comment period for our agenda today. At this time, we would like to welcome members of the public to share their comments. To our speakers, note that there will be a timer displayed on the screen indicating your time remaining, and an alert will indicate that you are out of time. Each speaker will be allotted 3 minutes to make their comments. We will be interrupting speakers who exceed 3 minutes, so please speak succinctly and please be respectful of the time. As a reminder, all public comments submitted by Monday, July 8th were presented to the committee members prior to this meeting. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. If anyone would like to speak, please raise your hand and I will call on you in the order that you raise your hands. Do we currently have any public comments? I'll ask one more time. Are there any public comments for FSCAC?
Yes, we have public comments, but I'm unable to see the hand raising from a screen that I'm on. Terry Prince.
All right, Terry, please go ahead.
Thank you. How pleased we are. I am Terry Prince, the CEO of Tarita, and one of the speakers who spoke at the initial meeting of this committee in May of 2023, and am now pleased to be the speaker at this first meeting of the committee with the new governance. The committee has delivered its report to for the first 545 days of the FedRep Act to its stakeholders. And Tarita is also delivering its report to the same stakeholder group, one of whom is, of course, the Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Government Affairs. Why is this important to our organization? Tarita is a WOSB of only 10 people worldwide in 2 companies. We have completed the entire FedRAMP gauntlet 3PO process. We did a pre-readiness in 2017, a RAR in 2018, a RAR in 2020, a SAR in 2023. We completed this in the fall of 2023 with a debrief to FedRAMP exactly in the middle of its conversion from its old system to its new system. You can't imagine how surprised we were to read the report that was submitted, and no one mentioned that there had only been 47 platform as a service authorizations from 2011 to the current moment in time. If one looks at that particular list, imagine Tarita, the small business, waiting in the FedRAMP, which I call the Valley of Death, the new Valley of Death, where one waits after they finish the czar, receives agency ATO in December of 2023, and still is in this position. That was not mentioned in the oversight report, and we have stakeholders who are feeling the pain of all of this situation, this horrific situation, 3,194 reuses for the original people on the platform as a service list, and no new individuals, no thought for the small businesses who are sitting here worried about the cost of this organization. And we are so committed to FedRAMP.
Mary,
I did want to say one last thing. I wanted to say thank you for being the organization with these requirements, but I do not want to say thank you for the new processes and the current processes.
all right, thank you,
Very
Terry. You're
disappointed.
out of time. I apologize.
I'm finished.
You're out of
Thank you.
time. Are there any other public comments for the committee today? All right. With that, we will conclude our public comment section for today. Thank you all. We will now go ahead and jump into our agenda's first topic of today. That will be our chair remarks. Larry, welcome. As the chair committee, I would like to invite you to make any remarks that you would like to do at this time. I would be happy to answer any FSCA related questions should they come up.
Thank you, Michelle. First and foremost, I want to thank any of our West Coast friends for joining us from the Pacific Standard Time Zone this morning. I do want to take a few minutes to provide a brief recap of our last meeting, revisit the priorities that we voted on, and then share some additional information that I received from the GSA administrator regarding our priorities. During our March meeting, we deliberated and came up with about 15 different priorities. After refining our focus in our May meeting, we were able to narrow the list down to 3 priorities, which we restructured into 2, each with a sub-priority. Those current priorities are: 1, identify challenges and propose solutions around the barrier to entry for CSPs with a focus on small businesses, 3PAOs, small and large agencies, with the sub-priority of evaluating and providing guidance for a minimum risk threshold, minimum acceptability standardized baselines for sponsoring agencies and 3PAOs. That sub-priority also carries over to the second priority, which is consider ways to expedite the certification process, explore agile authorizations and other potential cost reductions, both labor and financial, again, with that same sub-priority. In addition to these 2 priorities, the GSA administrator decided to task this advisory committee with 2 additional priorities for us to develop a set of recommendations in addition to our existing priorities. The 2 additional priorities are: 1, identify best practices and recommendations on how FedRAMP can make progress with commercial reciprocity using different security frameworks, for example, PCI, DSS, and SOC2 Type 2. And secondly, identify what is needed to support OSCAL adoption, and if there are any barriers to OSCAL interoperability within the CSP and agency GRC ecosystem that need to be addressed. We will be including these 2 additional priorities with our existing set of priorities, which means that this year we will develop recommendations for a set of 4 priorities in one report to the administrator. Does the committee have any questions? Hearing no questions, then, in terms of today's agenda and focus, during our last meeting in May, we explored the idea of dividing the work into subcommittees, but it seemed the committee was not in favor of this approach. So today, it will be important for us to identify the best approach and timeline for finalizing and delivering our recommendations. Finally, while we receive information from FedRAMP and OMB today, please take note of any missing gaps of knowledge you may have or potential agenda items you would like to see in a future meeting so that we can plan our meetings for the year ahead accordingly. One more time, does anyone have any questions before we proceed? Okay, great. Thank you all. That's all I have for today, Michelle. So back to you. Let's get on with the meeting.
All right, thank you, Larry. We will now move on to our first presentation of the day. Ryan Palmer, Ryan Hazing, and Dave Waltermuir and Zari Singer from FedRAMP are here to present on the program's updates since we last met. Ryan, Dave, and Zari, thank you for joining us today.
Michelle. Is somebody going to be screen sharing?
We are.
We are currently screen sharing, and we have the FedRAMP roadmap beginning slide up on the screen.
Okay, I see it. Thank you. First off, thank you for having us today. We're happy to be here to present some of the work that has been going on behind the scenes here at FedRAMP over the last fiscal year. My name is Ryan Hazing. I'm FedRAMP's Customer Success Manager. We're going to have a few folks from the team deliver a couple different slides here, and then we'll open it up to questions along the way. So with that said, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Ryan Palmer, to give an update on ET prioritization framework.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for this opportunity to present. We launched the ET prioritization framework towards the end of June. The ET prioritization framework was required by the executive order. It's a framework that allows, and with input, to identify emerging technologies that will be prioritized through the authorization process. The first technologies that we're prioritizing are generative AI, so that's chat interfaces, image generation, and code functionality. We're also looking at prioritizing APIs that provide access to allow other systems to build those capabilities or incorporate those capabilities into their systems. We have an application process, I believe closes on August 31st. So please we encourage you all to please get your submissions in if you have a qualifying cloud service offering. I will say also that the ET framework was the launch of some of our first web content. So look for FedRAMP going forward to start producing this as more web content, less PDFs and other documents that you have to download. It was a pleasure working on this project, and we're excited to see the different technologies that this gets in the market and how this can encourage and accelerate agency access to emerging technology. The next item I'd want to cover is our Agile Delivery Pilot. We had a lot of community excitement around this one, as well as agency excitement. We launched our pilot program as a whole. So we have a pilot webpage where you can see the pilots we're running. Our first pilot's going to be on Agile Delivery, but other pilots are going to follow and expand on the success of this concept, and also pilot other changes to improve our processes, speed up delivery, et cetera. So that can be based on recommendations from this very committee, like the things we work on, and also feedback from our stakeholders. Our Agile Delivery Pilot is really focused on moving us toward allowing CSPs to deliver capabilities and new features in an agile way. We know that our CSP community has a lot of mature change management processes that incorporate assessment within those processes. So they're doing secure software scanning, they're doing, they're testing controls, they have mature configuration management. This is all baked in. So what we're doing through this pilot is recognizing that CSPs will do a self-assessment as they release these changes. Agencies will be able to opt into these new services. So these services are opt-in during the course of the pilot. At the end of the pilot, we're going to require a 3PO assessment, and we'll compare those results. Did the CSP identify the same vulnerabilities through their own assessment processes? as the 3PAO related to the new service. This will help us get to more agile delivery within the marketplace, but also work towards continuous assessment, which is something you're going to hear from the program, I think, more and more often, is how do we get to automated testing of changes in systems to facilitate a better understanding and a more real-time understanding of the risk posture of systems and move away where possible from those point-in-time assessments. From an agency perspective, this will ensure that agencies have access to new features and allow CSPs to keep FedRAMP offerings in lock or better align the capabilities within their FedRAMP offerings with a commercial offering, or even encourage commercial offerings to enter the FedRAMP process and marketplace, because new feature delivery will not be blocked by a specific approval process. So look forward to new projects, new pilots, and we're going to be looking for about 20 CSPs to participate in this. So please do apply if you're interested. Pass it over to Dave Waltermeyer.
Thanks, Ryan, and good morning. Today I'm talking a little bit about a website that we launched last Thursday, automate.fedramp.gov. This website represents a new resource, a developer hub that targets the underserved tool developer community, providing valuable documentation around how to form digital authorization packages and generally supporting FedRAMP automation initiatives. We're providing a number of resources on this website for developers of governance, risk, and compliance tools, or package creation tools that may be maintained by cloud service providers. This includes guides that provide requirements around forming correct OSCAL data in support of digital authorization packages and continuous monitoring. Documentation around the various OSCAL models, what they provide and how to use them. Information about existing open source tools that are currently provided by NIST and FedRAMP. Some really useful background information on the FedRAMP authorization process and how it plans to use OSCAL. And in the future, this website will be expanded to include information about REST APIs that will be used for automatically submitting data for both initial package review and continuous monitoring in the future, as well as richer tutorials and training materials further supporting FedRAMP automation. These resources are organized in a web-first, digital experience. Our goal for this site is to provide current, up-to-date, information about interacting with FedRAMP digitally. And we plan to use this hub as a way to facilitate more community collaboration going forward, to work with our stakeholders to directly improve this information. Next slide, please. And with this, I would like to turn it over to Zari.
Ryan Hazing for this one.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ryan. Go ahead.
Thanks, Dave. So one of the things we wanted to capture and touch on today is the growth of the FedRAMP team. About a year ago, we were down to 3 FTEs, and we've grown the program significantly in bringing on cybersecurity leadership as well as some new technical folks. I think the big elephant in the room is that we are still hiring a new FedRAMP director. I'm happy to say that we're very close to having a director, permanent director on board. They are going through the rigorous government hiring process, and an offer has been accepted. So it's just a matter of time before a director is onboarded. We've used something called Tech2Gov to bring on some software engineer and data scientists. We actually have 2 offers out, and we're wrapping up our next round of interviews to bring on 2 more people, hopefully. We also will be hiring a director of security. That role it should be going out soon on USA Jobs. And then we've also partnered with the USDC, US Digital Corps, to bring on 2 early mid-career support who have studied cybersecurity and are really eager to join the government and help out the program. So we're really happy about that. I will say one thing that's not in here is we actually also this week onboarded a vulnerability manager, common lead, who just started on yesterday. So by the end of the year, we're looking to bring on 12 to 14 staff. So it's a huge improvement and has definitely helped out. And I wanted to make sure we share that with everybody, because it is something it's not splashy, but it's definitely something that is going to help improve the program and bring us to the next phase of FedRAMP. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to, is it Zari here?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Okay, great. Thank you. So hiring is one of the elements of increasing our technical capacity and expertise, which was a big part of our element. But another that we also wanted to highlight was our technical advisory group. So this is all about bringing more technical expertise into the FedRAMP ecosystem. So our technical advisory group, or the TAG, is made up of federal employees that have significant practitioner experience and expertise in cloud. The TAG members, the TAG was recently assembled, and the members were jointly selected by OMB and FedRAMP. And their expertise includes cybersecurity, privacy, digital service delivery, artificial intelligence, and management of cloud infrastructure. And they provide advice and guidance as requested by the program. So we work with them on sort of an iterative basis as things arise where we think that their expertise could really be helpful to us in helping to improve the outcomes of our work. And they can also be requested to support the FedRAMP board in their efforts as well. So they're really focused on helping FedRAMP make decisions on processes, policies, and other areas where their specific independent technical expertise can help with that. They are not a voting body, so they're on the advisory side, and they meet periodically and sort of as requested as things arise. So it's a unique sort of way for us to really leverage their expertise and for us to be meeting with them in a way that's really useful to the program, and it's a great way for us to expand that capacity. And we'll move on to our final slide. So we did want to, as we know that this group is focused on a set of priorities. And one of the last meetings we had some discussions about, and wanting to provide some information about how this group could kind of in that work support the program. We wanted to share some things that would be particularly useful for us. So I'll talk through these, and then we have the folks on the team that can help field questions and provide more detail. So one area that it would be particularly beneficial to the program is to help us understand what the agency and CSP barriers are for adopting OSCAL-enabled GRC tools. to support both their authorization and continuous monitoring processes. Another one related to one of the recently added priorities is to provide advice on high ROI starting points. So where are the best places that we can focus and start for how FedRAMP can best leverage external frameworks and approach reciprocity, which is an element of our roadmap, but one that is a bit further out right now in 25. And so helping us sort of get a starting place there would be really helpful for the program. As Ryan Palmer mentioned, encouraging companies to apply to the Agile Delivery Pilot who'd be willing to invest the time and effort in that process to actively participate and share best practices. Another thing that we wanted to share is that we're going to be posting our proposed KPIs for public comment next month. And so we would love feedback from this group on those. And then finally, recommendations for facilitating the recognition tools and services that can provide inheritable controls and facilitate continuous automated assessments. So some things that are very much in line with our roadmap that we wanted to share with this group. Any other comments on these from either Ryan Palmer, Dave, or Ryan Hazing?
I'm good.
Okay, so with that, I think we can open it up to questions for the theme.
All right, thank you all. We will go ahead into the straight into the committee question and answers, where I ask that members please raise their hands during this during that time. I will call on you to unmute yourselves and ask your questions. Please note we have a hard stop at 9:55 for this agenda item. Does anyone have any questions? All right, Jackie, go ahead.
Hi, this is Jackie Snoffer, DoD representative. And I had several questions for the emerging technology area with the large language models and the Gen AI. Is FedRAMP looking at additional controls or testing to understand how data is stored, reused, and that type of thing, and how we can notify our mission owners or those that are actually using these LLMs as to reuse of their data for learning opportunities, and how other data is being ingested into that large language model. And I asked that if we're using a widely available commercial large language model in the federal space, what hallucination may take place from reuse of data, how is CUI information being protected and being reused, and so do we need different controls for evaluation, and do we need different information out for configuration of these large language models for the federal agencies that may be reusing that data? Over.
Ryan.
Jackie, I can try to the extent possible, I can try to answer that. So the emerging tech framework, right? AI will exist as technology that comes through our emerging tech prioritization path, but also through change requests and just entrants who may not be prioritized or already exist in the marketplace. FedRAMP does understand the concerns related to how data is used, especially with AI, that are evolving. We are working with our partners in NIST to better understand what those any additional controls that may could be informed or better inform agencies or validate the AI is secure. From the existing control set, there is a large amount of coverage as long as those controls are evaluated in the light of the AI context. The fundamental security principles of least privilege, access control, information flow enforcement, those things still apply whether it be a conventional system or an AI system. I think one thing that you did touch on is, right now there's a lot of focus on input validation, right? And input validation can concerns related to that, but also potentially output validation or filtering as it relates to AI models, where you want to have additional insight into what a model may be, how a model may respond. I think the other concern related to agencies, the use of agency data is always something that agencies need to be aware of and informed of when they're looking at an AI model or an AI-based service.
Thanks, Ryan. We were in discussion with one of the vendors this week on their model. And I just want to emphasize, I think it's really important as agencies authorize, as FedRAMP looks at this, that we are making sure that they understand what that model is doing, how it's looking at the data. And it's important in terms of reciprocity and reuse on the marketplace, so that not every agency is going back to the vendor to understand what that model is doing, so that they can actually select a model that's appropriate for their data, because there are wide variety of ways that data is stored, used, reused, and combined.
Certainly concur with that. And if you notice also, as part of the framework, we are requiring a model card, which provides agencies some of that information related to what the model does and how it may be used.
Thanks. And I have one more question for you, Ryan. In the change process that you described, and the self-assessment, are you requiring those changes to take place in a test environment for the assessment and attestation before it is moved to production? And do you have thresholds for when it can automatically move into production, for an agency's use? Over.
So I'll answer the first part first, right? All the services launched under this pilot have to be opt-in. So agencies would have to elect to use the new service. That we did that intentionally as part of this pilot to mitigate some of those uses or potential risks of new services. That gives agencies a chance to evaluate what the vendor has provided. As far as the thresholds and testing, there's as part of a mature change configuration process, they should be doing that testing as part of their change management processes. Likely that's involved multiple different environments. We didn't specify the exact requirement as particular environments because it may vary vendor to vendor, and we're interested in learning from the community's best practices. There is a requirement that there not be unmitigated higher critical vulnerabilities in the solution when it is put into the production state. So if there were a critical or high vulnerability, it would need to be mitigated prior to production use or production release to customers.
Thank you.
All right, great. Marcy, you're next.
Thank you. Marcy Womack with Shulman. I have a couple of questions. So again, on the Agile Delivery pilot, Ryan, is this primarily, like, obviously this first one is SCR focused. Do we anticipate that this pilot would later extend to other like non-SCR activities, or would it be perhaps increasing the scope of SCRs that might be included in the program?
So pilots in general, what I'm hearing is, what do future pilots look like, and what is the next step for significant changes?
Mm-hmm.
For significant changes, I fully expect that we're going to continue to expand on this based on the first round of success. Like we narrowed the scope on this first one to get our first pilot under our belts and see some of these best practices. Some of the feedback we've heard is, vendors may wish, cloud service providers may wish to change out tooling, especially where there are opportunities for automation. I think it absolutely makes sense to start outlining those future pilots. Additional pilots beyond SCR are certainly going to occur. I don't want to speak too fully, but the digital authorization package how do we start testing that as we roll out our new platform? I would expect to see new pilots. In addition to some of the areas that we made recommendations for. So one area I'm personally interested in is how do we have tools and services provide inheritable controls off cloud. So if you're using a particular antivirus or audit logging tool, could it provide like a pre-baked configuration that a CSP or an agency could consume and then do automated testing of those controls relevant to the stack, right? So obviously certain products are only going to be relevant for like containers or operating systems. But I think there's opportunity there to start piloting, especially as it moves us towards better processes and improved efficiencies for both agencies and CSPs.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And then last question regarding the technical advisory group. So I guess my question is, how do the guidance decisions made by the group make it to actual like program implementation to make, affect change that affect CSPs, 3POs, agencies that are undergoing the process? An example was given around FIPS 140 and how that affects the various controls there. Curious how it gets from here's the discussion in the advisory group to here's how the FedRAMP guidance dictated in the documentation, such as security system security plan. What does that process look like, and what would potentially be the timeline?
So I won't speak exactly to FIPS. I think in a general sense, and maybe Dave can speak more towards the FIPS part of that question. I will say that the real one significant value of the tag is that they are a diverse set of practitioners. So when they're looking at some of the guidance and other things we may be working on, they're able to provide a perspective of someone on the technology side who may be implementing, using, leveraging, or the real world impact of that. I think that provides us a unique viewpoint and their thoughts and considerations as they evaluate particular new policies or new guidance provides a more diverse perspective than we may have internally within the program. So there's a lot of value there. Dave, did you want to talk about FIPS at all?
Well, I don't really want to focus
Sorry.
on the specific control. I guess my question is more programmatic. It's great. I mean, we've had PMO giving us guidance in the background for years, and it's never appeared in documentation. So when we go as a 3PAO to our clients and say, hey, this is going to be an issue, and they're like, this isn't documented anywhere. We're like, we totally understand, but been there, done that. We know what's going to happen. So I guess my question is, this guidance is going to be excellent and we look forward to it. How does it actually get into documented practice?
So there certainly will be guidance documents where this is new guidance that everybody's required to follow. We're also producing, and within reason, the tag may review these as well as knowledge base articles. So we want a knowledge base full of real world examples of how to implement specific controls or a library of potential implementations that have been successful in controls. Our intent is that knowledge base is public, and that when we do, in both cases, whether it be a knowledge base article or guidance, that we really cover all our stakeholders. So that includes CSPs, that includes agencies who are using it, that includes agencies who are authorizing a product, as well as any guidance we might have for independent auditors or 3POs.
That's great. And the reason I'm asking is just because it really bogs down the assessment and authorization cycle. So I think that's really important, but I appreciate the clarifications, and that is it for me.
If I could just add one thing, which is, part of what we're also trying to do in these, in our policy updates, is to be clear around, what's required of each stakeholder that is working individual parts of the process. So what CSPs are required to provide in their documentation, what 3PAOs are required to do as part of their assessments, what reviewers should look for as part of the package reviews that they're doing, and we believe that this may also help to drive the kind of behavior that you're talking about. here. I think that coupled with the examples that we're providing in the policies and in the knowledge base articles, should drive some significant change in this area.
Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you. Kayla, you're next.
Thank you. I'm Kayla Underkoffler with HackerOne. And so my question was around the Emerging Technologies program. Obviously, this is a new program, so getting everything set up and making sure it works properly is the most important component. But I was just wondering what the vision is for how this is going to be able to scale, seeing as how it's an application process right now. So apply, get selected, be a part of the program, and that is going to, of course, limit how many organizations or CSOs you can have in this. So I'm just curious on what the vision is for how this is going to be able to scale in the future.
So I think there's a couple factors here to consider. So one is that we are through the emerging tech framework going to prioritize a specific number of cloud service offerings based on those capabilities. Those are the ones that are going to be prioritized. That doesn't mean that those are the only ones that are going to be authorized. So if you're not prioritized, you still can go, there's still the regular authorization pipeline. So we're not limiting access to technology. It's just we're moving some of those CSPs to the front of the line. I think overall, our goal as a program is to reduce authorization times in general. So the benefit of prioritization over time, especially as we modernize and work on things like automation, automated assessment, all those other improvements means that the impact of being prioritized will actually will be less and less over time, because everybody in the marketplace should experience a better experience, a quicker time to authorization and quicker review. We're also working with, our work with DISA on authorizing partners also expands our capacity, because now we have a trusted authorizing partner who their work will be accepted by the program and go through a low touch review. So we're doing a lot of things within the marketplace in general to improve that experience, reduce time to authorization. And I don't see the prioritization as providing as much benefit in the future. And again, that door isn't shut to those services that that don't make it through prioritization.
Great, thank you.
All right, great. Bill, you're next.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Sir.
Good, thanks. Having technical issues this morning. Looks like I chose the right shirt to wear today, which is exciting. So I wanted to camp onto some of the stuff that Jackie was talking about with regard to particularly the new generative technologies and whatnot. I think I've talked about this a little bit, so I don't want to filibuster too much here, but I do feel like we are rapidly reaching a point where our existing security controls under 853 are not sufficient for the technologies that we are now dealing with, and figuring out how FedRAMP is going to play into that, I think is going to be really critical for us moving ahead. One of the struggles that I'm dealing with from where I'm sitting in agency is that vendors are continuously bundling more and more of these technologies into their existing services, which from FedRAMP's perspective, y'all are the front door. And once you're in the front door, well, you're in, it's done. And so that becomes especially problematic. I think a lot of y'all might remember from late last year, there was a major cloud vendor that started introducing a bunch of new AI services into their existing tools, and they were feeding that training data back into itself, which the government doesn't want our data shared back to these companies. And that was a pretty big problem for a lot of us. Those of you all who are on the Cloud and Infrastructure Committee of Practice mailing list, you know what I'm talking about. The rest of y'all, everything is fine. And I brought this up with the FedRAMP group at that time through those channels as well. I don't expect you all to have a solution for all of this. I want to be totally upfront about that. It's a little bit outside of the scope as currently defined here today. You're not the SOC for the entire federal government, nor do I expect you to be. But I do feel like there needs to be a conversation held about where we're going and why we're in this handbasket with regard to like particularly these generative technologies that you all are prioritizing to get through the pipeline. The initial authorization is fine, but then figuring out where we go from there and being able to keep on top of that is increasingly a problem, especially for us small agencies that are just making assumptions that everything is going to continue to be fine, but we're finding out that that's not the case as these continue to evolve. The other thing I want to mention is you all are evaluating the services a lot of the time, but those services are increasingly bundling additional models into them. So again, I don't want to name specific products here, but Amazon Bedrock is probably one that everybody's familiar with, where they provide the service platform and there's many models bundled under that, and they continue to grow every day. I don't think FedRAMP is doing individual model evaluation right now at that level. Correct me if I'm wrong. But things like the end user license agreements that are different from service to service and that sort of stuff that we need to take into account as we're thinking through what we're implementing. But my first point was just kind of, I guess, filibustering this meeting to say AI is scary. But I didn't know if you all had any thoughts about how we can address some of those sorts of things. That's the first thing I would ask about.
I would say if you look at the emerging tech prioritization of those products, and I'm not speaking globally at this point, just for those that we prioritize, we did try to take those considerations for safe agency use into mind. One of the things we asked and required was that the use of agency data for training was an opt-in selection. We understand for general improvement, right? So a lot of providers may, to make a model successful for a given use case, like there might be a need to train on government data related to that specific government customer or tenant. But if it's used for general product improvement, we want to make sure, we do want to make sure these are as widely usable as possible based on the different data needs across government. We wanted to make that, that was one of the considerations. We also asked for model cards. Originally, when we released the framework, we were just looking at like the quantitative, like performance of those things. The model card, and we standardized basically on the public model card, which gives a lot of information, not only about the model, but how it was trained, and also the use cases that maybe aren't compatible. So some of the feedback, and based on some of what's out there, like a model may not be performant in a different language. It's really important for agencies to understand the limitations of the models they may choose to use. Having FedRAMP approve and validate each model could be a challenge because AI is developing so quickly, but making sure to the extent possible, agencies do have more transparency about the models they're using, what the intents are. Our hope is that allows agencies to make their own informed decisions on use and get to those decisions in a fairly rapid way. I certainly do agree that there's room for growth and improvement, and we're going to see that over time and in collaboration with NIST and other stakeholders.
I also wanted to say, this is also not a one and done, process with the initial package review. There's also continuous monitoring, where we can. Yeah, well, I think there's an opportunity to do more as far as looking at, configuration, and to make sure that opt-in is an enabled feature. As new risks are identified around federal use of AI, and potentially new controls are identified to deal with that, that's something that can also be picked up as part of the continuous monitoring process. So I think there is a capability to look at this with a fresh eye over time, and to address additional risks.
Thanks for that, David. You teed me up very nicely there. First off, I do want to wildly applaud the opt-in by default, not opt-out by default. So for those of you who are cloud vendors who are on the call, please pay attention to that one. That's a big one that's been a thorn in my side lately. But also the continuous nature that you're mentioning. My follow-up question to that then is, if we are moving towards continuous authorization, does that mean that there's going to be a process of revocation of FedRAMP authorization for things that suddenly decide to not comply?
As a program, we already do have like escalation procedures. Normally things start getting captured on the POAM. Then there's, a cap, then there might be suspension, and then eventually, CSP may be removed from the marketplace. As a program, we see ourselves as partners with CSPs. We need to be really good at identifying issues and then working to get them resolved. So there's a lot of impacts to both agencies who may be users, but also CSPs when somebody's removed from the marketplace. So the best outcome is that, we return to that good, secure state, but there are procedures in place to revoke if it were to come to that sort of situation.
I'm just glad that we have that option that's on the table. I don't expect that we will need to use it at all, because everybody's going to play nicely and do exactly what we tell them to do. But thank you for the clarification on that. The only last thing I wanted to say is wild applause for getting the new Automate site set up. Obviously, as a longtime supporter and enthusiast of OSCAL, seeing these tools in the new website to get it in front of people is amazing. So mad props to y'all for getting that done. It looks great. Continue the awesome work.
Thanks, Bill. Bo, you're next.
Thanks, Michelle. I want to go back and double down on something that Jackie and Bill were hitting on, specifically relative to the emerging technologies, particularly with a focus on AI. There does seem to be an emerging set of cybersecurity guardrails, particularly around AI in particular, but can be more broadly applied to emerging tech in general. Everything from added controls around data ownership, portability, key ownership for encryption, data sharing, model testing and validation, model carding, insider threat related concerns. Fully, applaud again this notion around focusing on opt-in versus opt-out. I'm curious, have we started to go through and take some of these evolving guardrails that some of which are already inclusive of the FedRAMP baselines, some of which are not, and put these forth as generalized AI-specific recommendations to these cloud service providers that are actively moving forth with FedRAMP authorizations, for existing services or new services that are underpinned by some kind of an AI, technology. Just as a follow-on to that is, David, I think just talked to this just briefly, but what set of expectations have we set forth with those cloud service providers that are, moving forth with FedRAMP authorized AI services, in that, guidance is coming and that they are going to be expected to go through and comport either as part of the CONMON process or the annual assessment process? Any kind of feedback would be helpful.
So, Bo, I don't have a list of particular controls at this point in time, but we are working with NIST, and we've also gotten some, feedback from other groups, including, the former JAB technical representatives who have, shared what their different organizations are also doing related to AI. So, I would say that that's certainly something we're aware of and something that we're working as part of a community to come up with the right approach. That's likely to include, guidance around existing controls to help ensure that, when we're assessing or looking or evaluating existing control, that it's done in the light of the particular potential risks related to AI. A lot of the risks of AI, though, are beyond the traditional platform that, or system approach that FedRAMP does take. So they're usage related risks. And that's something that right now FedRAMP has not really, we're not currently exploring because it gets really complicated and it is agency or use case specific. I know NIST, for example, has released a generative AI framework or a generative AI profile that agencies can use to help inform that. I know that there's a lot of mature agency or maturing or already released agency policies that do cover the particular use or specific usage risks related to generative AI or AI technology in general.
Yeah, I think, it's just important to make sure that, some guidance is better than no guidance or slow guidance in this area, especially as the technology starts to go through and move out. So just being able to go through and forecast the overall, policy or control making process and what progress we're making in that, and just set the base expectations with both providers as well as 3POW organizations on what to expect, I think is really important. It'll just essentially go through and set the groundwork for follow on controls, testing, revalidation that might potentially be needed. I'm not saying it will be needed, but could potentially be needed as the feedback from NIST and other related bodies comes into play.
Certainly, Bo. I definitely agree. That's certainly an area where additional guidance and clarity can certainly help our stakeholder community.
Hey, just one more question. This one is relating to reciprocity. So I think one of the challenges that we've had with reciprocity is just defining exactly what it means. Has there been any thought at this point relative to reciprocity at what level, at a controls level, or reciprocity one for one based on a commensurate alignment to a FedRAMP low or moderate authorization to a reciprocal framework that exists more broadly within industry? Are we just starting that process and examining the available set options?
I think, Bo, that would be in its early stages, and because of the number of commercial frameworks out there, the capabilities for reciprocity are going to vary a lot. I think at a minimum, right, leveraging existing artifacts, existing testing, and tools and like OSCAL, for example, will allow additional portability and probably translation between like the control responses themselves would be a starting point, and then looking at those different commercial frameworks and understanding how they may map and the extent, especially right now we're talking about, I believe, low, but how that would map to, say, a moderate or other level.
Very good. Thank you.
Hey, Ryan, this is Mike from Google. Just a quick question. Going back to controls and emerging technology, one of the things we are seeing are some controls as we're looking at AI that were previously, acceptable for services that were being delivered using, previous architectures, may or may not be as applicable, or potentially are degrading performance because of the positioning that they're putting us in as a cloud service provider. So I'm curious if there's going to be, as part of the emerging technologies framework, a way for us to highlight those controls, potentially have a methodology for review if if they could be applied or not with the FedRAMP PMO or the tag. And then, potentially if there's a way for us to look at that, basically do a deeper inspection on these controls themselves and their application. Some of them also have extreme cost associated with them, specifically around, data center turn up, performance turn up within data centers for AI, et cetera.
So to make sure I'm understanding, the question is like, how some of the existing controls as currently outlined are detrimental to the creation and operation of generative AI systems? Is that or is it that those controls are no longer providing or resulting in secure outcomes?
Right. Yeah, it's both. So they could potentially not be providing the security that or compliance that we're looking for anymore in these new frameworks, or they could be impacting performance to a point that the new technology is not useful for the federal government with that control applied. And or it may be so cost prohibitive to the CSP that we may not want to bring them even into a compliant state, due to the control mechanism itself. So looking to see, like, are we considering these possibilities in any type of methodology or review process for the applying controls or potentially modifying controls in the emerging technologies framework process?
So the current emerging technologies framework process is designed based on the current control set to, we're trying to get agency access to, emerging technology in a timely way and make sure it can, and prioritizing it through authorization. But it doesn't do a deep dive on particular controls that may be more or less relevant based on that particular technology. One of the reasons for that is that whether they're prioritized or not, AI through significant changes, through just our normal authorization processes, and that could be any emerging technology, will end up into our environments. I think this is so emerging technology framework or not is going to be introduced to cloud into cloud services and going to be provided to agencies. With that in mind, I think there's always an approach where we have to partner with the industry and community and groups like the FSCAC on how those controls change, what control approaches may no longer be effective, and what could be more effective ways to implement those controls given the emerging technology. We understand that CSPs are innovating in these areas, and will look for opportunities to understand how those how they're meeting the intent of those controls, perhaps when emerging technology is involved. I think the other part of that is in general, the other part of that is addressing like the performance impact you mentioned, and that I think ties into the same thing. So, if there's an existing control, the current approach isn't working, right? And we may identify that through our review process, that might be identified through a 3PO, that might be identified via industry. What is the way to still implement that control and get that effectiveness, but also how do we do that in a performant way? I think there's probably a lot of opportunities there for partnership and understanding, especially the folks are seeing given implementations are challenged.
Got it. Thanks, Ryan. I'm just curious, do we have, so it seems right now it's a very ad hoc type of process. Is there any plan for us to standardize that or provide at least a input mechanism to the FedRAMP board from CSPs and industry?
I certainly think the FSCAC is one of those venues. We also release, as part of the emerging tech process, right? We are going to have the technologies in future rounds. There'll be more input on what those are. The first batch was set through the executive order, so that might be another capability. I can't speak to all methods of input, but we also have InfoAt that we watch, listen to as a program, and you're willing and you're able to provide feedback or concerns or other insights through that as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Great, thanks. Josh, you're next.
Thanks, I'll be quick. Most of the questions I had were already covered by the speakers. This is Josh with VA. My only question was around controls for AI, and just interested if there was any work going on to somehow connect some of how you're adopting like data standards and things for AI and emerging tech into your processes with the teams that are working on some of the guidance under 14110 that I think has similar requirements for agencies to develop controls around data, and if there was any intent to like kind of align whatever FedRAMP was doing with potentially some guidance or some of the memos that was expected to come out to help guide how we, within the agencies develop that same kind of framework.
Certainly we are, working with NIST and tracking on what NIST is doing. As an individual, I'm also looking at some of the policies and guidance that, agencies and organizations are putting out to see where there are those common elements that FedRAMP could could evaluate and consider as we work on any sort of AI specific guidance or like an AI type overlay for particular services. We're also getting feedback from some of the former JAB technical representatives who are, their own organizations have identified particular controls or different specific concerns related to AI. That may inform internal review at first, but I certainly think there's an opportunity for FedRAMP to help ensure that agencies have what they need to securely authorize and use those cloud services.
Thank you.
All right, great. Thanks, Josh. Jackie, you have another question?
Last one, I promise. So we talked about the new tag. Is that replacing the TRs? And do we understand membership or is that fluid? And how does the tag operate and what are they considering?
So I'm happy to start on this one and others can jump in. So we don't think of it as a replacement for TRs in the sense that they are doing sort of a different set of work. So they're really meant to be like a group of practitioners who are helping to advise on specific policies, processes, any sort of particular issues that arise that we deal with both at the operational and strategic level, where we think that their unique guidance and advice can help. And we do engage with them in a pretty ad hoc basis. So we have like an established communication channel that we're using to reach out to them pretty on an intermittent basis. We have sort of periodic meetings that are very topic specific, but I think it's kind of safe to say that anything that you see that's going to be coming out from us, we're engaging with the tag on that and getting their input and feedback on those things that we are developing. But it's a little bit of a different orientation in that way in terms of the advice and guidance. And the membership was jointly selected by both OMB and GSA, and we have we can share there's a press release that has like the agencies that are represented and all of that. Dave, Ryan, anything you want to add to that?
Just to kind of double down on the difference in like role and a lot of these folks are going to be actual implementers or users of FedRAMP guidance. So when we, if we're floating a knowledge base article by them, they would be the ones who might be looking at this knowledge base article and actually executing on it. Means hands-on keyboard, like making changes to technical systems, thinking about how they would record that in their own POAM or a system, like a system team, or understanding how a change to a cloud service provider, like as people mentioned, like what are the concerns related to data on AI as a consumer of a cloud service? So that's a slightly different perspective and slightly different background than the former TR role, which was not necessarily a system level practitioner, implementer, or consumer of FedRAMP as like an individual.
Thanks, Ryan. That's really helpful. So you talked about the consumers as well as the implementers, and are you going to have those that are in the evaluation areas? Like I have TRs today, right? And so they actually use your guidance in the validation and issuance, you know, of our authorizations and that type of thing. So you're going to have that group represented as well to make sure that it covers that specific angle and answers those questions as well.
Yes, our membership does include that perspective, like the like a ISM level role work that would be working with cloud service providers.
Thanks.
All right, great. Kayla, you're next.
Thanks, Kayla, from HackerOne again. I was just wondering if why there isn't any commercial representation in the tag, and I'm sure there's a really easy answer for that, but I figured I'd just ask it because I'd seen that floating around here and there. Or private sector, whatever term we want to use there.
So actually I can address this question. So when we do have a mixed federal and private organization, that would fall under the FACA rules. So it would have to be a formal committee, kind of like the FSCAC.
Great.
So the FSCAC can serve that portion of the advisory space.
Cool. All right. Thank you, Michelle.
Another note there is also that there is some capability where there's particular authorizations or approaches where we may want to discuss a cloud service provider. This ensures that there's no challenges with the membership there, that we would never want a situation where one CSP would be evaluating another CSP's approach, especially when we're looking, we want to facilitate innovation within our marketplace and how cloud providers and industry is approaching security controls and how we might evaluate those. So this provides us that opportunity in a way that doesn't create a potential challenge or competition issue.
Thank you.
All right, and Bo and Mike, you both still have your hands up. Do you have additional questions, or are those just left up from our previous questions?
Just left up.
Same.
All right, fantastic. Does anyone have any other questions from the FSCAC? Alrighty.
So 2 quick notes. I do have a question for Dave, but Bo, thank you for bringing up the concerns on reciprocity. And it's not a coincidence that our administrator, the GSA administrator, has added that as a topic for us to consider on this committee, and we'll be certainly dealing with that. And so I appreciate your input on that. And we will be working on a recommendation in that area. So thank you, Bo, for that. The committee will be adding that to our agenda for this year. Dave, on the OSCAL work, can you share a timeline for that or confirm the timeline for that? Because that's another thing that the administrators asked us to add, and understanding the program's timeline for that will help us with prioritizing our work here in the FSCAC.
Sure. So there's a few milestones that we're working towards. The first was launching the automate.fedramp.gov website, which we did last week. We're actively right now preparing to start a digital authorization pilot in August. Our focus there is really around maturing some of the guidance that's on the Automate website, as well as validation tooling to support that piloting activity. Our main goals for that pilot is to really work with cloud service providers to mature their digital packages, to make sure that all the relevant and needed information is provided, and that our validations and guidelines are are targeting the right things. So, you know, we'll be working on that, you know, through the rest of the calendar year. Did that answer your question?
I think so, Dave. Thanks. And I appreciate that. And congratulations on the Automate site. A significant milestone and a great step. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Michelle, back to you.
All right. Well, thank you all. And I'll definitely appreciate all of the feedback. We are going to go ahead and take a break. We are running ahead of time, so if we could please go ahead and start a break, and we'll start now and come back at 10:10 a.m. And then we'll go into our discussion with OMB. Thank you so much. All right, thank you all. Welcome back from our break. We will now move on to our second agenda item today. We have Drew Milkegaard and Laura Gerhardt from OMB here to talk to us about the status of the FedRAMP memo and any new updates since we last met. Drew and Laura, thank you for joining us today. I know that we have not yet published anything from OMB, but is there anything you can share with us about the pending memo?
Yeah, certainly. Good morning, everyone. I'm Laura Gerhardt, and I'm the Director of Technology Modernization and Data here at the Office of Management and Budget and the Office of the Federal Chief Information Officer. So, we, as you notice, have not published the final guidance, and we can't provide a specific release date for the guidance at this time, but rest assured we are working diligently to finalize it. It's certainly top of our mind, and we're working as fast as we can and as considerably to sort of get that out. I can share some updates, and Drew can sort of add in this. We released the draft guidance back in October, and a lot of what you're going to see is reflected in that guidance, and really working to operationalize what is in the guidance already. In particular, as the FedRAMP team at GSA already briefed you on, we've been working to stand up the TAG, the Technical Advisory Group, which is sort of first announced within the proposed guidance. We've been working with the change requests, et cetera. And also, we announced the board and the membership of the board, which again is sort of critical in terms of creating the framework and vision within the draft guidance. And again, the FedRAMP PMO, as you already saw earlier today, is working diligently on operationalizing a lot of those, and their briefing really indicated that, as well as the roadmap on that. And with that, I'll turn it over to Drew for sort of any additional comments.
No, Laura did great. We're just really excited about the momentum we're generating, and like outside of just the memo. And this is a little bit different. Usually we don't begin work before a memo is released, but in this particular instance, we've done a ton of the work inside the memo, and we're getting really good feedback. So think of this as more like an iterative software process, which is in line with what, like we've been trying to do in our office, where we get really good feedback. So we're all like trying to push through and get this out as soon as possible, because we really think it's big, but also like just pushing ahead on the efforts we've already started. Thanks, Laura.
Great. Thank you, Laura and Drew. We will now go ahead and move straight to our committee Q&A, where I'll ask that members please raise your hands, and I will call on you to unmute yourself in the order that you raise your hand. Anybody have any questions for OMB? Great, Marcy, go ahead.
Thank you. Marcy Womack with Shellman. I have, in terms of Drew, you mentioned, operationalizing some of the items in the memo. I don't know if you're able to speak to if there, or if this is more toward the PMO, and that's fine, but if there's been any milestones that have been met in terms of the program authorization. So, instead of having just the agency path or the dual multi-agency path, that there's anything you can speak to regarding that program authorization.
Laura, do you want to take that one, or do you?
Yeah, I think it's internally we're working pretty closely with the PMO on sort of looking at what sort of some initial program authorizations might look like.
Okay, great. And then is there any anticipation of formal announcement or what that would look like, anything like that?
I think a lot of our focus, we're gonna have to wait until the board meets and decisions from the wider board. Like OMB can set the policy, but as far as like implementing it, we see that as a board function. And so we've got board meetings coming up, and that will be part of an early agenda item for sure.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. And the reason I'm asking is because that obviously goes really closely to, reducing barriers to entry for CSPs, really focusing on getting more CSPs into the program, that kind of thing, just, increasing the paths authorization. So appreciate the updates you're able to provide.
Yeah, no, and I mean, we really see it as necessary. And Marcy, it's a really good question, and like top of mind for us, but we also see it as a way of like help, because there isn't always a great incentive for agencies to sponsor things that they're not directly using. So like we see a lot of power and usefulness in the program authorizations. We just want to make sure that like we have board consensus and everybody like moving in the same direction on that. And like any sort of new thing, we want to just make sure we're testing a little bit and getting it right. But we do see a ton of value in this.
Awesome, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Bo.
Okay. Oh.
Overlist GSA. Drew, Laura, there is a lot to like in the FedRAMP policy memo. From a timing perspective, can you set the stage in terms of what the process? Obviously, you just mentioned the FedRAMP board having to need to come together to meet to be able to go through and discuss. When do you envision the actual publishing of the memo here? Is this an FY24 type product, or do you see this sometime in FY25?
So, Bo, I always appreciate the compliments in the beginning on the memo. It shows that we're in the right direction. Like our intention is to not be delayed any more than we have to. We're at one of the points internally where we're gaining clearance throughout our building. So like we are past the stage of writing. If you know about the OMB process, like we open up the, like they think of it as shutters on a building, and we're gaining consensus, or we're hearing about things, and then we close the shutters and we work to gain internal consensus. And so that is the point we're at. And like always my fear of putting a time on it is like I'm always going to be wrong. So like just know that we are through all the external consensus gathering, and we are just gaining consensus internally, and that is the step before it goes out.
Thank you for that.
All right, do we have any other questions for OMB? All right. Thank you again, Laura and Drew, for joining us today. I would now like to go ahead and invite the committee to begin their deliberations. As always, please remember to restate your name prior to speaking. With that, I will now open the floor for members to discuss. Larry, would you like to kick things off and share the goals for today's deliberations?
Absolutely, yes. Thank you, Michelle. So as we move into our deliberations, our goals today are, as you can see on the screen, are one, to finalize the language of our priorities. Two, to define the approach we'd like to take as a committee in completing this work. And lastly, three, to identify what meetings are needed for us to finalize our recommendations. So our ultimate outcome is to have an initial plan and an approach of how we want to accomplish developing and finalizing our recommendations in these 4 priority areas. Ideally, mapping out the committee's activities for the coming year. So let's start off by addressing the first goal today. The first goal, as I mentioned, is to agree on the wording or come up with finalized wording for these 4 priorities. So as a reminder, our priorities are listed on this slide. I'd like everyone to please take a minute to reread the priorities on your own. After reviewing these, does the committee have any final edits or wordsmithing that we need to make on the language of these priorities so that they're more clear? I'd like to spend not more than 10 minutes here and make changes on the screen in real time. Does anyone have a request for a change or an edit of the language?
Bronca, go ahead.
Hey, Larry, Bronco says a couple of things for the second priority. I think consider is a good start, but we need another action verb. What do we do with them after we consider, whether we recommend or issue recommendations or come up with best practices? So we just need a second action verb there. And those under the guidance language for both, although I think I understand what is meant by minimum risk threshold, minimum acceptability standards, I just, I don't know, we have 10 minutes and I don't think that's enough time to edit and come up with a better language. I'll just express my concern that it's not very clear. That's all I can do it in this amount of time.
Thanks, Bronco. Yeah, that was condensed from a 3rd priority in the last meeting and added as a sub priority under 1 and 2. The good news is that as we work through these goals, as we work through these issues, we can certainly tighten up and address the intent. But if we can tighten up the wording today, I'm certainly open to that.
And Larry, I will say that we are running a little ahead of time, so we could spend additional time more than 10 minutes that we allotted.
Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, okay. So Bronco, if you have live suggestions on the 2 sub priorities or others on the committee, we can certainly focus some time on that.
I'll let others speak first, and if we have any time left, we can go back and work on those.
All right, great. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I put a recommendation in the chat. I think for any of these, they should be identify, adopt, and publicly document, or something similar to that. So basically saying, let's do the exploration, let's adopt and sign off on these, right? And then let's actually document that in a way that is available for everybody in the FedRAMP community. again, that's we could debate that, but I think those are the main action verbs. Hopefully, Bronco, that gets you where you want to go.
All right, great. Bo, you're next.
Hey, thank you, Michelle. For one, I was not tracking a specific set of barriers to entry for small and large agencies. Can you speak to that a little bit more specifically? Obviously, the broad set of discussions to date have largely focused around small business, challenges around 3POW organizations. I'm curious exactly what the focus and intent around small and large agencies, particularly with a focus on barrier to entry, looks like. Are we talking about small and large agencies that are themselves cloud service providers? Or are we talking about small and large agencies in the context of sponsorships?
I think the latter, but I will defer to those who actually came up with that language.
I think that's what we had said. Sorry, this is Bill from SEC. I think that's what we had talked about before is the barriers to being sponsoring agencies. We'd also talked about the barriers to things like OSCAL adoption, which I think ties in here on the fourth one.
Okay. Yeah, so it might make sense to perhaps just add that or clarify that just for clarity purposes. And for the second priority, we're talking about identifying, adopting, and publicly documenting ways to expedite the cert process, exploring agile authorizations and potential cost reductions for both labor and financial. I guess the question is, for whom? Is this for all participants and stakeholders, or is this really focused on labor and financial cost reductions specifically for CSPs, the small organizations that are struggling to get through this process? So we should really focus on identify our target audience there, because one is a subset, the other is the superset, and obviously trying to go through and target everybody as our audience, that's a fairly sizable undertaking.
Do you want to jump in with more questions or address those first?
So I concur with Bo's point, but again, I am just one vote on the committee as well. But Bo, well said, point well taken. I do think that the objective for number 2 is that community of CSPs, particularly the small businesses. So we certainly could clarify that. And I think the work done in that area, if we clarify it and focus it, the work will still be applicable to a broader set.
Yeah, that would be my implied understanding. But again, just for clarity purposes, it might make sense for us to go through and more specifically target CSPs, with a focus on small business.
Kayla?
So for the first one, it might be helpful also for us to add some type of qualifier around maybe critical challenges or the top challenges. We will obviously address a whole list of challenges, but we will likely select the top ones we want to address for solutions. Yeah, and then I also like the comments of narrowing in number 2. And one thing I was wondering here was we say expedite the certification process. And maybe this is just a challenge for me here, but I would love some maybe clarification from the group on what we specifically defined certification process in for this. Was your first coming into FedRAMP? Is this if you're moving from low to moderate? Is this ongoing ConMon certifications? Maybe just, I'm sure we'll go through that and figure it out as we're identifying the solutions here, but that was a question I've had in my mind.
Great. Lamont, you're next.
Thank you. Yes, she stole my thunder. I was going to question articulating what the certification process was as well. But while I'm here, the sub bullets in 1 and 2 reads a little wonky to me. I think it should be either remove the 4A, either remove the A or remove the S in baselines. One or the other. So it says evaluate and provide guidance for A, minimum risk threshold, minimum acceptability standardized baselines. The A or the S in baseline should probably go.
All right, thank you, Lamont. Bronco, you're next.
Now I'm for submitting, but that default language now that we copied, identify, adopt, and publicly document for all 3 or all 4, I don't think applies. I don't think we adopt. Our job, the job of the committee is to recommend. So we do identify, publicly document, and then we propose solutions or we recommend solutions. I don't think adopt fits there. So we just have to be careful. And maybe this is for someone who proofreads this at the end to make sure that this is addressed.
And Bronco, just to react to that, I think these priorities are for the FedRAMP PMO from us, if that's correct. And maybe we could just get clarification on that.
No, these priorities are what we will be working on providing recommendations to the GSA administrator for over the next year.
Got it. Then you have your point stands.
All right, Marcy, you're next.
Thank you. If we could just remove certification from this, it's nitpicky, but it's an authorization process. There's not a FedRAMP certification. So just note authorization, that'd be helpful. And one of my just general questions, and Larry may defer to you on your guidance here. So for numbers 3 and 4, do we feel like each of these nest under 1 and 2 respectively? Like we should address 1 and 2 with these particular considerations in mind, or leave them as standalone? For example, like a top challenge and barrier to entry for CSPs is that, you know, they have to undergo all of these other security and compliance engagements, frameworks, assessments, attestations. So reducing or being able to leverage any sort of reciprocity or reuse could potentially like reduce, you know, barrier to entry. So that would potentially fall under number 1, but it could also reduce cost and speed up the authorization process. So it could potentially nest under number 2. So that's kind of what I was proposing, if that makes sense, or from a coverage perspective, since these were kind of, you know, provided to us if we want to leave them as standalone.
So great points, Marcy. Let me open it up to the committee for their thoughts and perhaps a consensus.
This is Kayla. I definitely see 3 and 4 being challenges with proposed solutions for either of the barrier to entry or expediting authorization process. But part of me also appreciates them being called out as unique priorities because they are significant topics, which is, I think these were on the original priorities list anyways. And so, yeah, I like them being standalone, even if in the end we tie them up to the barrier to entry or call them out as something for authorization process.
I agree that, you know, leaving them as standalone priorities does not prevent us from linking them to 1 and 2. And I think, you know, we clearly will need to do that and address them in the context of 1 and 2 as well. Other thoughts, questions, and comments?
Yeah, Larry, this is Bo. I actually agree as well, and that they really should be kept separate and distinct, especially 3, because a lot of times when we look at other frameworks in terms of reciprocity, we think about them in the context of the FedRAMP program process control sets. And if we truly are going to be looking at reciprocity from an outside in perspective, we have to go through and not just simply look at individual part reuse, but really think about this as entire framework reuse or framework adoption or alignment. So, keeping this separate and distinct would allow us, in my view, to be able to go through and have a broader view on how this can be potentially integrated with, or perhaps kept entirely separate as a corresponding framework that can be used together with the existing FedRAMP program and process baselines.
Thanks, Bo.
All right, great. Jackie, you're next.
Jackie Snoffer, DOD. I just wanted to comment on the sub-bullet for number 2. And I, as an authorizing official, I have a real hard time with minimum. We've got to provide guidance on risk thresholds and accessibility and standards. We shouldn't be in the practice of minimum. We need to be looking at our risk tolerance and what is our acceptable level of risk and how we're going to quantify it. And I'm probably alone in that, but I do have an issue with that. And on item 3 with the reciprocity standards in the department, we actually require if a cloud service offering is processing financial data, we actually require a SOC 2 report. And so that is just another audit standard that is required for the financial community. So it's interesting, we've got reciprocity and we actually require that in addition to coming through the FedRAMP process. So that was just a point of note. It's something we might want to explore as we move through here. Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie. Yeah, I like the idea of not just straight reciprocity, but essentially overlays, where you have additional overlaying or overlapping requirements that you need to add on to the baseline. So thanks for that. Thanks for sharing that.
And Bronco.
Back to Jackie's comment, maybe we rewrite this as to provide guidance for sponsoring agencies and 3PAOs that commensurate the risk, acceptable risk, or something along those lines. But also, I have a question for the committee. Is this in our scope to provide guidance, and do we have capacity to even develop such guidance?
So what our scope is limited to providing recommendations to the GSA administrator and to the FedRAMP board and other agencies for secure adoption of cloud. So that is what the scope is limited to. So I would recommend that we provide advice.
Yep.
Yeah, I think when we looked at this, we were actually looking to prompt FedRAMP to set minimum standards and to document those standards, or, for risk acceptance, that, the community is very broad. And it could even be not a threshold, but even just requirements to document how an authorizing official got to that risk evaluation. In a way that can be consumed and reused by another authorizing official.
Great, thanks, Jackie. Any other comments before we move on?
So again, back that language, that sub-bullet language, should we even remove it? Because I don't think it's still good enough to stay there. And this is a question for everyone. I'd like everyone to look at it and read it carefully.
Franco, I agree. I think we had a lot of, if you go back to the votes, I think we had a lot of concern in this area at the last meeting with a lot of abstains. And if I had to guess, it was around this language. So I'm with you.
Bo, go ahead.
Bo, you're on mute.
Thank you, Bo Burles, GSA. I think this was one of the broad areas that we did have a lot of discussion on, specifically around this bifurcated nature of varying level of FedRAMP authorizations and perceived levels of quality or effectiveness corresponding to those FedRAMP authorizations. And, so creating a common baseline or a minimum baseline of risk acceptability, risk thresholds, review framework, and tracking documents seem to make sense. I do have some of the same concerns that Bronco's raising, in that a lot of these are really at the program level, at the AO level, at the board level. We can certainly go through and provide feedback, input into what we believe should be certain set minimum considerations. But ultimately, it's the decision of these, the board, the PMO, these individualized agency authorizing officials and their CIOs that are making these risk determinations. Instead of perhaps saying evaluate and provide advice, I think the intent is ensuring that there is a publicly available document that is provided through the PMO under the FedRAMP construct that identifies minimum risk thresholds and acceptability criteria for FedRAMP authorization packages at the various risk levels. So I don't know that it is incumbent on this group to develop it as much as it is incumbent on this group to ensure that FedRAMP develops it and puts it out there. And to the extent that we can provide comments, that's great. But I don't know that it's really should be on this group to come up with the broad set of risk considerations for or on behalf of the FedRAMP the FedRAMP board, the FedRAMP PMO, or other agency CISO and CIOs. It would seem to be out of place.
So, and thank you. And in the May meeting, this was initially proposed as a standalone priority. And after some discussion and deliberation, it was folded under the two, at that point, the only two priorities that were agreed upon. Question, given what you said, Bo, and that makes a lot of sense, we can delete that language completely and just leave the bold text that we have for the 4 priorities, or we could modify that to a standalone priority that focuses on what you described, Bo, about advising, because again, our charter is to advise the administrator. So what's the best approach?
Yeah, this would seem an order of operations, and that first order of operation would be that somebody has to go through and develop and establish those minimum thresholds against which we then review and provide advice and consult, if you will. So, how to facilitate that, or whether that order of operations is really necessary for us to be able to capture this. I don't know. I would probably just go through and remove the evaluate and provide advice and just keep it at ensure minimum risk thresholds, minimum acceptability criteria, and just go on with the rest of the sentence.
Is there concurrence on that? I mean, we're freely editing as we go, so we're not moving and seconding on at this stage. So other thoughts? And Bo, yeah, I appreciate.
I would just add the word ensure there before minimum.
Yeah.
And that would seem to consider the order of operation challenge.
Thank you. Kayla?
So I just as I'm reading through this, then that I'm trying to visualize how we would incorporate this into our final report or our recommendations at the end. And I feel like in the end, this would be its own standalone focus, even if it's just, we recommend that somebody else create this minimum baseline. And so I feel like these challenges in bold, or these goals in bold, are solid enough on their own without adding these as a footer to each of them, like without adding the ensure misc minimum for either of them. So I would also be in support of us just getting rid of that as a footer to those specific goals and priorities. Because I think we're going to incorporate that, and we could incorporate that with even any 4 of these priorities that we have.
Agreed. And I think, I think this is something that we are, this is partly why we're here. We're mindful of that exact requirement. I'm in favor of deleting those, but I want to hear if there's any objections from the committee members.
Yeah, it's almost as if that sub-bullet is similar to the EG PCI DSS. It's just one thing that could be done to facilitate, the assessment and authorization process. So removing that outright, or perhaps transitioning that to an example, I think is fine. What we shouldn't lose sight of that as an action, however.
I absolutely agree. I don't want us to lose sight of it. So the idea of including it as an example or a footnote to the priorities is certainly workable.
Thank you for your suggestion. I do have a note for us to do that. And it looks like we do need to move on to more discussion of our priorities. So we are at time. I think we probably should go ahead and move to the next slide, Larry.
Okay, I just had to work my screens there. So thank you. And thanks all for that. So now that we have clarified the 4 priorities, the next step is to talk about how we'd like to work on them by having a discussion around these 3 questions listed on this slide. I'd like to time box this section to 20 minutes if possible. So Michelle, if you could let us know when we're at 20 minutes, that'd be great. And it sounds like based on the last meeting, the May meeting, this committee prefers to work together as a whole rather than to break into small groups and then later regroup as a whole. Is that still the case? I see a thumbs up. I see a couple of thumbs up, and now we got some hands. So
yeah, we got some hands. Bill, you're first. Go ahead.
Yes.
Thank you, Bill.
How about you, Bo?
I propose we perhaps do a quick straw vote. I know we've got some new participants, and it would be I think good to give everybody an opportunity to revisit and have their voices heard.
All right, Josh, go ahead.
Thanks. I'll be quick. I just wanted to confirm, because I believe this is part of the conversation the last time this came up, was especially for folks who may not have been here the last time, one of the not concerns but questions around the subcommittees was what went into those meetings. And I just wanted to clarify, the subcommittees would require a similar level of scrutiny is the wrong word, but kind of coordination that goes into this meeting and has that, just to give some idea of what those might feel like. I don't know that I personally had an enormous concern with that, but I just wanted to say that I think that was part of the questions around last time. So just confirming that that's still the case.
Yeah, Josh, great question. I will defer to Michelle as the designated federal official to confirm for us what the subcommittee requirements are, the transparency requirements around subcommittee meetings, et cetera. Michelle?
Yes, for GSA, the way they interpret FSCAC requirements is that they are substantially the same as the parent committee. So that they will be fully public and completely transparent to the public.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you.
And you know, this is a public meeting. We've got lots of participants, lots of observers here in this meeting. Your subcommittee meetings will be subject to the same Federal Register announcements, et cetera. So the consensus from May was to work as a committee of the whole. And so I'm totally up for Bo's suggestion of taking a straw vote now that we understand the parameters of subcommittees versus committee as a whole. Michelle, you want to take a vote?
Sure. We do have to have a motion for a vote. So Larry, are you motioning for a vote?
Yes, I am.
All right. Is there a second?
Seconded. It's Bill.
All right, great. We could go ahead and go through a vote. Let me get.
So the motion, to keep it a simple yes, no vote, the motion is the motion will be to work together as a committee of the whole. If that ends up with a no, then we can take a vote on subcommittees. So the first vote will be on working as a committee of the whole.
All right, great. Thanks, Larry. I appreciate that. I'll go ahead and do a roll call vote. Larry, how do you vote?
Yes.
Michael, how do you vote?
Yes.
Carlton, how do you vote?
Yes.
All right. Kayla, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Josh, how do you vote?
Yes.
Daniel, how do you vote?
Yes.
Marcy, how do you vote?
Yes.
Bronco, how do you vote?
Yes.
Matt, how do you vote? Bo, how do you vote?
Yes.
Lamont, how do you vote?
Yes.
Nauman, how do you vote?
Yes.
Jackie, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Bill, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Josh,
Yes.
Joshua, hey, how do you vote?
Yes.
All right, thank you. It looks like it's unanimous, so we will not be breaking into subcommittees.
All right. Thank you for that. So our next bullet is, how do we prefer to receive information? Based on the presentations today, I'm sure that some of you took notes on additional information you would still like to receive, or that you know that you'd like updates on in the future. Based on your notes and your observations, how do we prefer to receive this information? Presentations, panel discussions, full committee deliberations where we each represent our respective stakeholder group in our responses, or perhaps another way that I haven't mentioned. Does anyone have additional thoughts? Recognizing that we had, Bronco, you raised your hand, good.
I'll start with briefings by various interest groups such as 3PAOs or any groups that are affected by these concerns. I found those to be extremely useful, such as the briefings we had by FedRAMP PMO, 3PAOs, etc.
Great, thank you. Mike, you're next.
Similarly, if we could get a list of potentially the public documented changes that have occurred between meetings from the FedRAMP PMO, any processes, standards, et cetera, that have been published, so that we could review them and make sure that we're seeing significant progress towards resolving our 2023 priorities and 2024 priorities, that would be helpful.
Okay, great. Marcy, go ahead.
Thank you, Marcy Wishelman. Just +1 to both of those, as well as like the Q&A activities that follow like after those briefings is very helpful. One additional comment, and I would just question if this is allowed. If we could, if there's a presentation such as, you know, a PowerPoint, if we could receive that potentially ahead of time just to review and obviously have additional review and deliberation during the session, it would be helpful. I often find that I'm listening to folks and then taking my notes and trying to just iterate on that in real time, and it's difficult to do. So I think that would lead to more fruitful discussion as well.
Thanks, Marcy.
Great. Bill, go ahead.
Only thing I wanted to add to the first bit of this is we discussed in the last meeting the difficulty of getting information from larger groups than just a few invited specialty speakers, right? So we had started a thread on the mailing list about potentially doing surveys and the challenges that could come with that, whether or not we need PRA clearance, et cetera. I would like to potentially revisit that, or at least some sort of a broader solicitation for public comment or otherwise. I'm really, really worried about limited number of voices that we have in the room. Particularly when we're talking about trying to streamline things for small businesses that I think are underrepresented in these groups, and we've heard that they're very interested in these topics. So my recommendation would be for us to potentially revisit the surveys and/or look for other ways of soliciting public comment. Again, I think there's the ways that we can do that and that we can do it easily without worrying about PRA necessarily. So just want to put that out there.
And I will state, we did check with our attorneys, and we, as an organization, are subject to PRA.
It is subject to PRA, but I don't think this needs to be as difficult as it may appear to be, given that we are trying to just get information that's relatively public and low effort from businesses. I think it's worth having a discussion with OMB about what would be required to do it.
Appreciate that. Thanks, Bill.
All right, and Bo, you're next.
Yeah, I'm just going to go through and echo Bill's last statement around a broader solicitation for public comment. I love the notion around a specific call, for either special interest groups or, cloud service providers really focused and prioritized around the 4 priorities that we just completed discussing, such that if there are existing, 3 POWs, cloud service organizations, associations, or other SIGs that might actually have some thoughts on the matter that they can effectively enrich the conversation on, it would be wonderful for us to be able to consume that information in advance to allow us to be able to go through and think through all the varying permutations that sometimes are not fully possible in the context of a briefing such as this, in the context of 30 minutes, 45 minutes. So the more information we have, I think the better we will personally be enriched, and I think the better outcome that we'll ultimately end up with.
Great, thank you, Bo. And I do want to remind the committee that we do allow for public comments, and these are available to the public to attend. So they can provide written comments at any time at our website. We just aren't getting a lot of comments that are sent to the committee members. Joshua, you're next.
Thanks. And some of what I was going to say was already covered by Bill. So I guess I would just double down on the public comment, but just another channel for that, as well as specifically the voice of small businesses. But I was going to add to the list of potential people we may want to talk to include frontline, I say, agency team members who are working agency sponsorships. I think we've talked a lot about streamlining things for people, and I think it's part of the process that happens within those sponsored agencies. That's a little more tactical, and it might be helpful to have that, that viewpoint part of the discussion, especially in a world where like JAB's gone away, there's going to be no reliance on agency sponsorship.
All right, great. I will let you know, Joshua, you were a little difficult for me to understand. I don't know if some of the other folks had the same issues. But if you'd like to follow up and provide comments written, I can make sure that they are recorded correctly.
Sure, I'll type something in the chat too. Sorry about that.
All right, thanks, no problem. Jackie, you're next.
This is along those same lines, which is, as I was listening to our public comment this morning, you could tell she was very passionate about her concerns, and we gave her 3 minutes, and granted, if everyone participated, we could go on all day, right? But it seems to me that that's somewhat limited in what we're able to get in that short a period of time. And also there is no ability to dialogue, to understand further the concerns. And so it goes along the lines of, do we really have really good information from the broad spectrum of cloud providers, mission owners, sponsoring folks, as input, and especially the small business is a concern. One of the groups that I actually met with, that I was the Cloud Service Provider Advisory Board, and I was surprised they're broad swath of cloud providers, and I was really surprised at some of the overall misunderstanding that exists, even in a board like that, and to be able to spend a couple hours with them, the clarity we had in the relationships was really, really good. And so I think having groups like that interact, and it's not a one-way feed. We've got to be able to have that dialogue with all of these folks, and whether that's in this form or another form, I don't know, but especially on the public comment, I felt for the briefer this morning that we ran out of time, and listening to her journey, there were obviously the issues, probably some on her side, probably some on FedRAMP's side, but that's obviously a case where we could learn from that and try to incorporate those challenges. Over.
Thanks, Jackie. So we also have media. These meetings are open to the media. Certainly, I'm hearing a very strong desire to increase the amount of public comment that we see and that we receive. If PRA prevents us from doing a survey, I'll look into ways that we can possibly do an RFI, a request for information. The other thing is, if there's media on, covering this meeting today, and they report that we want to hear more, we do have a public comment mailbox. We do solicit public comment in our Federal Register announcements, and those comments are distributed to the committee in advance of the meeting. Comes to your point of, I'd like to see the slides in advance. The public comments that we receive in writing are shared in advance. So if we can get the word out more effectively that we want public comment, that we're open to public comment, I would welcome that. And there you are.
Yeah,
So
Larry,
go ahead, Bo. Yeah.
Yeah, one thing just might be for us, we're it seems like we're at a fairly, critical milestone with these 4 new priorities, enumerating our path forward here for the next set of months. It might make sense for us to go through and focus on some kind of a focused social media campaign via, Twitter, LinkedIn, as part of gsa.gov, and also think about doing so in advance of some of these FSCAC specific meetings, to really get the word out that we are focused around these priorities, and these types of comments and feedback are welcome. That might get a little bit more participation than we may have seen previously.
Yeah, thanks, Bo. And I saw Bill's body language concurring.
Sorry, I don't mean to jump the order here, but I did want to say, like, I strongly concur. I don't think this is a lack of interest. I think that most folks are either unaware of this as being a forum to hear those complaints, or they don't necessarily see that this is that there is even a way for them to engage. They're probably used to getting it through maybe FedRAMP directly, who may already have some of these comments that they can share back to us. Would be one place, but moreover, yes, this is one of those things where we need like an outreach campaign. I spent years doing collaborative like policy making with like the public, and I don't think people are reading Federal Register notices to be able to drive engagement. At the end of the day, we probably need a different approach and plan there. Using the various social media platforms, I think, is great. Getting the outreach to some of the special interest groups that actually organize around these topics, I think, would also be fantastic. The mailing list of the 3 PAOs would be a great group to outreach to. Those sorts of things that I think that we could probably be doing. I'm just reminded of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, you know, where the Vogons are going through and they bulldoze the planet. Well, it's been posted in the comment office for a millennia. Why didn't you respond? I don't think that's helping us.
So, Bill, I also think it honors all of you and the time that you put into volunteering for this committee, that you're expressing your desire to hear from more voices and from more of the affected communities. So I really appreciate that concern. It underscores the importance of the time that you give to this committee. And that was the collective you, the plural you, not just Bill. Kayla, do you have a hand up?
I do, yes. So just a quick for the public comments that we do have open pre-meetings. And one thing I was looking at is obviously we're narrowing our agenda as we go because we're selecting these priorities now and really focusing in on them. But Bo mentioned this really quickly too. And I think the more we can like have a very bold, bulleted, this is the thing we're going to talk about in this meeting. So, you know, if you have concerns about reciprocity between different compliance frameworks, this is your chance. You know, so then having the echoing of all of us being able to share this, having a media push, having a campaign push, and plus having a very specific agenda of we're talking about reciprocity, this is what we're going to deliberate about versus just saying deliberation. I think that would be really helpful too for folks who might need that focus to be able to share their thoughts and concerns.
Thank you.
Hey, Larry, this is Mike from Google. One other thing about receiving additional information, it would be good to see if we have a published roadmap and schedule on for the FedRAMP PMO and the tag, so that we understand what they're working on, when it's expected to land. The other thing that would be very helpful, I think there's a lot of confusion, especially in the CSP space, around how are all of these, different, like the board, the PMO, the tag, how are they going to interact and operate? There's just a lot of confusion right now around how this impacts the authorization processes, et cetera. So anything we could do, maybe we need a special memo or paper coming out from the PMO on how this is all going to be planned to work and interact. Something that's very simple to digest and published publicly, so that we could start to reference that from the CSP side of the house would be very helpful. I know I'm fielding questions constantly from the CSPAB members around those topics specifically. Like right now, everyone's still confused as to who's authorizing, who's got the ball for authorizations. Do I go to the former JAB people I used to talk to? Do I go to the board? Do I speak to the FSCAC? Do I speak to the tag members now? Like there's just a lot of confusion, to Jackie's point earlier. And I think we need to do, in the next 30 days, a type of education or training or documentation that's available for everybody to make it very clear and crisp.
All right, great. Thank you, Mike. And I do want to say that Darcy has put a link to a FedRAMP blog that was released on the governance structure and including the roles of the advisory committees. So that is probably the best place to point people in the future for that.
Yeah, I just want to comment on that. I think it's a good start, but I think people are looking for the next level down, right? Like, how do I get my service authorized? Who do I have to go talk to? How do I make sure that a control is up to date? Like, I think we need to we need to push ourselves to a little bit more clarification for the CSPs and the 3 PALs and everybody else, of course.
Bo, did you have a hand up?
Yeah, just echoing what Mike is noting. I'm kind of hearing some of the same as well, particularly relative to who's on first, who's on second. You know, where the relevant deck chairs on the deck, if you will. So perhaps going through and putting some kind of a hierarchy of roles, responsibilities, and where to get started in the process in and of itself might be helpful. I know some of these bodies are just getting formed and it's just a matter of time. But the need is certainly there. And I think some teams are directly coming, for example, to my team, and I'm sure that same is happening to other teams as well in terms of just seeking information on how best to engage and whom to engage with.
Understood. Yeah, we'll have to do some clarification. Clearly, clarification is needed. And then the question is, who puts out what? But there is a need for more clarification, apparently.
And this is Marcy with Shulman. I want to briefly tag on, and then to this, we have many CSPs and that historically had a JAB PATO, and they're continuing with JAB and continuing the Kanban process, even though technically a JAB doesn't exist anymore. So that's part of the confusion, is that there hasn't been like a formal transition plan that has not been communicated to CSPs. And so, from a 3PAO perspective, we're effectively saying these are the authorization paths as we know them currently. But we also know, for example, the program authorization path that is being stood up, but we don't quite have a timeline or the details regarding that. We know that JAB isn't taking on any new CSPs. They're continuing to support current CSPs that have a JAB PATO. So those are the types of clarifications I think that is really what we're getting at, is that things are happening really quickly and it's complex, of course, but more clarity is needed. And those are just a few examples. And I realize, again, that's probably, I don't know that that's something that we want to take on, but I know we've got a lot of folks from PMO here, so sharing for awareness.
I think that's exactly right, Marcy. And yeah, so back to the question of what's appropriate for us to communicate out, but sharing for awareness and applying that, sharing that need with our counterparts in the other organizations, in the PMO, et cetera, and the board, so that clarification is forthcoming. Okay, so great discussion on how we like to receive information, how we need to receive information, and I'm really energized by the the committee's the committee's desire to hear from more voices and to get the word out and hear more public comment. I'll personally take that as an action to try and explore ways that we can beat the bushes and get more participation. So the last thing, in terms of executing on our deliverable, understanding that we agreed to meet and work these priorities as a committee of the whole, how do we want to do our editing? I wasn't here last year, so I don't know whether editing as a whole group worked well last time. Would it be easier to break it into pieces, not subcommittees, but have individual volunteers work to write a portion or a chunk of the work and then bring it back to the committee for editing? Or do we want to just edit as a committee like we've been doing today? So I'm going to pause for discussion on that. And that's really just about not about meetings, but about the actual work of editing our written product. Kayla.
So I obviously didn't get to participate last year. I do feel like it's often most productive when a large group gets together with something already written to debate and discuss. So I would definitely go for some form of independent or pre-written content that then we can all dissect as a group. So maybe we edit that live. But well, we would of course edit that live, but if it's something we have beforehand, I think that makes us more productive.
Thanks, Kayla. And I'm going by the hands that I see on the screen. So Michelle, if you're seeing more hands than I am, please jump in. But I'm seeing Bo's hand next.
Yeah, definitely echo Kayla. And I think coming together and developing this in person, is going to be a challenge in my mind, because we're only going to be able to get and dig in so deep in that type of a form with so many people. And some of this is going to require some analytical thought just to be able to, connect the dots and be able to put something that is more broadly consumable by the committee at large. So if we're able to go through and break out into smaller groups, we've got a very rich wealth of individuals from 3PAWs, from cloud service organizations, as well as government, that have more specialized experience and expertise in each of these priorities. In my mind, it might make sense for us to break out into natural affinity groups and focus around each of these priorities that we can then bring back and then edit together as a committee. Just a suggestion, and echoing the recommendation from Kayla.
And Bo, I will have to interject here. If we do break into groups, that would be a subcommittee. So we would have to follow the subcommittee rules. With that, there is unfortunately no other option. So we either individually work and bring that work to the committee, or we break into subcommittees.
I do like the idea of having individuals write and compose, and then bringing that back for editing and review. Bo?
It's individually or as a group. I think either of those are more than acceptable.
Kayla.
I think that if we could, even if like we have multiple people individually working on the same topic, and then they're the ones responsible for it, if we want to split it up that way and bring it back, then we get overlap and all that as well.
Great, great. Bill, go ahead.
I'm just thinking back to things that worked especially well last year when we were going through this. And I'm thinking about things like where we were like collaboratively editing our feedback to say OMB on the draft memo, where everybody kind of wrote up their own sections and provided those, and they were kind of shared with the group for people to be able to collaboratively work on it. I think that worked really, really effectively for us. Personally, my brain kind of turns off when we're trying to wordsmith live. Like my brain, my little ADHD hamster doesn't work that way. So being able to take things offline, digest, and then formalize responses properly when I'm well caffeinated works way, way better for me, and being able to generate that content in an ongoing fashion. That being said, of course, like I understand that we are under particular rules under FSCAC of how we can do that. I'm perfectly fine with sharing all of those words in the public. I'm cool with all that if it helps. But being able to have that way of doing those sorts of feedback that isn't always live which just works way, way better for me personally.
Thanks, Bill.
right, Marcy, go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Marcy Wishelman. This is less about editing, so I apologize, but like I feel like we're jumping straight to editing all of these nuanced components to each of these priorities, and I'm wondering if it makes sense to essentially have another full meeting where it's like a brainstorming session. We tackle each of the priorities in a, I don't know, 45-minute segment, and we kind of throw everything at the wall, and then we hear each other's perspective because we have a really wide variety of folks and backgrounds and experiences here. And sometimes when I say something from the 3PAO perspective, it may not resonate with someone who is only seeing that from the agency perspective. So there's nuance that's lost. And so if we're able to have that type of session and then step away and have the, hey, let's document, you know, what we think should fall under each of these categories. And then we move into the editing phase. So we're wordsmithing, we're pulling things out, we're moving things from one to the other. I'm wondering if that might be an approach that could work.
Information gathering, discussion, and then essentially assigning or volunteering for certain chunks for individuals to write and then bring back for the editing in a separate meeting. I'm putting that into my own words because I want to make sure, Marcy, that I heard you right and that we're capturing it right.
Yeah, that's effectively it.
Thank you.
Of course.
Okay, and go to Bill.
Just building on that a little bit, I strongly agree doing the working sessions make a lot of sense. Last year, I think we kind of broke this up. So each of our priorities, we spent a chunk of the calendar working on rather than trying to get all of the priorities figured out in a single meeting. So like, let's start with priority 1 and run through that. I'd also recommend, personally, I feel like blissfully ignorant, for instance, of the problems with 3PAOs, except for obviously what Marcy has already told us in the few interviews that we've done here. So again, soliciting the feedback first so I can go in with an informed opinion and make recommendations, I think would be helpful. At the same time, I'm also happy to have people like present and talk on this first. But I mean, again, I need a little bit more time to digest and I want to hear from the wider field before we do that. So my 2 concrete recommendations here are let's kind of do this in sequence. Let's do one thing at a time. Typically that's going to expose other issues that are going to come downstream, and it kind of makes it easier to tackle one at a time. To get through all of that. And then my second recommendation would be I would like to do some foundational evidence gathering, surveys, research, etc., before we come together and start talking about our ideas about how to solve all of that. Unless everybody already knows how to solve all of these things, and I'm just the dumb one in the room, which may be the case. But that's my thought.
Great, thanks, Bill. Josh, go ahead.
Hi, Josh Kruger, Project Ghost. Yeah, I agree with Bill. I think we need to kind of focus on one priority. But a lot of us are new to this whole process. So what did work in the past? Can you guys tell us what you did last year? You guys had some great priorities, some great guidance that or advice that you gave out. But for us, that don't know how it worked last time and what actually worked for the team, it'd be great to give us that advice so we know how to proceed too. But I think should we start with prioritizing the priorities? Do we necessarily have to start at one and work our way down, or do we see some things as more crucial than others that we should start with? And is that something we should do where we get one priority right now and then we do an information gathering session? I don't, for example, know what the rule is. How are we allowed to survey people? Are we allowed to go, on our public LinkedIn and send it out? Are we allowed to go in, CSP meeting groups and say, hey, we're going to focus on this one priority. You guys have, 2 weeks to go put all your public comments out there for this one priority. Let's just focus on that for now. And then we all get together, throw all those public comments at the wall, and, do what Marcy was mentioning, which is, I think, a great idea. Or, just so we don't get an overload, people sending in a bunch of different things for all 4 priorities when we really only are going to focus on one the first quarter or however it may go. That's it.
All right, thanks, Josh. Jackie.
One of the things that Josh just said really resonated with me, and that is, do we need to potentially pull out? I heard in this discussion, I heard there's a lot of confusion out there right now. Do we need to provide a short-term recommendation to the FedRAMP PMO on clarity that's needed in the community immediately? You know, do we have a responsibility in the immediate while we work some of these long-term issues? They're still working on our proposals from last year. You know, and so, and we've not really gotten a full status update on all of that. So I think that as Bill said, you know, we really need to solicit more input, listening sessions, feedback on where we really are. But I'm wondering if we need a quick turnaround on some of the recommendations that we've heard that probably are quick wins for the FedRAMP PMO to help gain traction and clarity on where the program actually is in this implementation process. And my only recommendation from last year is I thought we took way too long to put together what essentially was a very short paper of recommendations. I think we can operate much faster than that. But again, that's probably my ADD talking, you know, that it just, in my world, it just took really a long time to wordsmith and to come up with those recommendations. Over.
Jackie, I will say, in terms of the need for clarity, I don't think we have to do a formal recommendation to the administrator on that. I believe I can communicate that to, as the chair, I can communicate that need to the FedRAMP program office and to members of the board that there is a need for additional clarity, that the blog is good, but we need more. So I wouldn't want to take committee time to working on a recommendation language, asking for more clarity. Is that okay? I'll just take it as a personal action.
I think that's good. The only thing that it does is if we document it, it becomes part of the record of what we have heard and what we're recommending to the PMO for action. That's the only counterpoint to that.
Great point, and I don't want to certainly deny that opportunity.
Could we do both? Could it be something that we document that, you know, Larry in his capacity took X action, but we're documenting it for the record, that kind of thing?
And I will state that the meeting minutes and also this recording are records. And this discussion is being captured as a record. So there is documentation that this is discussed.
All right, so I've heard that we want to have the opportunity to research and write individually, to take chunks of this. I will add that when you're working on a piece of a priority as an individual, you are not restricted in how you gather information, who you reach out to, what sources you use. So as a committee member, while you're doing your research and your writing that you're going to bring back, you have carte blanche to tap those sources, consult the experts, consult the stakeholders, and come back with your writing that we will then edit as a group. With that, at some point last year, the committee was meeting weekly in order to get the work done. So that the next question really is, you know, if we're going to, well, if we are going to work as individuals, but come back, and the sort of the sequencing, and I do like the idea of prioritizing the priorities, so that we're not trying to work on all four of them every time we get together. So that's another discussion that we need to have in terms of using the time we have remaining today to pick the top priorities. And then we need to figure out how frequently we need to come back together, and what's that sequence, that work schedule to come up with our recommendations. So let me just turn it over to the group for thoughts and discussion on that.
Josh, go ahead.
Yeah, so Larry, so if we prioritize priorities today, is our next step then to do the information gathering with the public? So I'm gonna kind of place into how often we want to meet. Do we want to give them, 2 weeks to give us information before our next meeting? And then I don't know if right now we know the cadence we need without having the input from them. So once we get that feedback on the next, open meeting, I think then we could probably decide, because as of right now, I don't know. We keep talking about edited and writing, and kind of to Marcy's point, we don't know what we're writing yet, right? So it's kind of hard to decide right now on how often we should meet or when our next meeting should be.
Yep, great point. And here we are, coming into the middle of July. We're at the middle of July, scheduling a meeting, where for those of you who have families, there's vacation time coming up. There's those of us in industry, there's the last month of the fiscal year when people get really busy responding to bids and proposals. So we need to be mindful of everybody's schedules. I do want to give, so if we are successful in getting the word out more effectively and soliciting more public comment, I want to give the public time to craft those comments and get them in. And then we as a committee have to take the time to review them and take them into account. So, that may take 3-4 weeks, I think is probably reasonable. We can look at when we schedule our next meeting. And hopefully we will have solicited comments on the question now. Solicit comments on one of these 4 priorities, focus in on one. So then which one do we want to prioritize to come back to prioritizing our priorities? And Darcy, do you want to put the 4? Oh, there you are. You anticipated that. The 4 priorities are back on the screen.
Josh, go ahead.
So are we looking to do a vote now on which ones we think we should prioritize from this, on which one we should prioritize for the first kind of sprint?
Yeah, I'd like to get consensus from the group for sure. That'll give us focus on sequencing the meetings, sequencing the priorities, and focusing our work. But as somebody commented earlier, as we gather information, even if we've done our drafting on the first of the priorities, the information we gather as we work through the 4 may inform rework on some of the earlier ones. So Michelle, I'll go back to you for calling on the hands.
All right, great. Bill, go ahead.
I would like to make a motion for us to vote on our top priority.
Second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
All right. This is going to be a little challenging to vote on this because we have the 4 priorities. Do we have a recommendation for which one that we want to vote on?
I was saying that we should everybody should pick their favorite.
And we'll do a simple majority.
That's my proposal.
Do we have a second on that?
This is Bo, I second.
Okay. Did we take the 4 priorities down? I'm not seeing them on my screen anymore.
I apologize. I hit a button. It's coming back. Give me a minute.
Okay, Darcy, I was afraid we lost you.
Nope.
Okay. So we're gonna do a roll call vote, and the votes are going to be for 1, 2, 3, or 4. We're going to tally them up and go for a simple majority. And Michelle, as the chair, I'm going to abstain.
Okay.
I'll save myself to be a tiebreaker if there's a tie for the top 2.
All right. Larry, you're abstaining. Michael Villacerca, how do you vote?
Vote for 2.
Carlton Harris, how do you vote?
I vote for 1.
Thank you. Kayla, how do you vote?
I vote for 1.
Josh Kruger, how do you vote?
Two.
All right. Daniel Payne, how do you vote?
2.
Marcy Womack, how do you vote?
2.
Bronco Bogan, how do you vote?
1.
Matt is not here. Bo Burles, how do you vote?
1.
Lamont Yarborough, how do you vote?
2.
Noman Ansari, how do you vote?
I think he had to drop Michelle.
Oh, okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Jackie, how do you vote?
Don't know. Because I believe that you could actually do 1 with 2. Because we're focused on small business and barriers to entry also include part of the expedition of the authorization process. So I think I have to cast my vote at number 2.
Okay, great. Thank you. Bill, how do you vote?
It's almost on party lines at this point. I'm voting 1, please.
All right. And Joshua Cohen, how do you vote?
Also 1. Thank you.
Well, we have a tie, looks like.
Okay, but I'm also hearing that the suggestion, I think it was Jackie's suggestion, that 1 and 2 could be tackled together. And I saw some thumbs up flying around.
Just a try. Actually, 1 had 6 votes, 2 had 5.
I got 6 votes for 2 as well. I got Jackie, Lamont, Marcy, Dan, Josh, and Mike Baserka. So I had 6.
Then I miscounted. I apologize.
No problem. No problem. That's why we back each other up. Do we have a motion to take 1 and 2 as our top as our co-top priorities and tackle them together? Or do I have to make it? Do I or do I have to make a tie-breaking vote? I heard
I
a
was
yes.
going to say the chair is there, but
I'm also sensitive to the consensus of the committee, and I really liked the sound of tackling them both. Is that self-defeating?
I think they're so intertwined that it makes sense to tackle them both. I think doing one helps the other and vice versa. So I think it 100% makes sense to try and do both at the same time.
Okay, chair can't vote for both. So do we have a motion to tackle them both as the top priority?
I'll make the motion to tackle both as a top priority.
And I'll second that.
Okay, we can do just a yes or no vote on this one, Michelle.
All right, great. Larry, how do you vote?
Yes.
Michael, how do you vote?
Yes.
Carlton, how do you vote?
Yes.
Kayla, how do you vote?
Yes.
Josh, how do you vote?
Yes.
Daniel, how do you vote?
Yes.
Marcy, how do you vote?
Yes.
Bronco, how do you vote?
Yes.
Bo, how do you vote?
Yes.
Lamont, how do you vote?
Yes.
Jackie, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Bill, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Joshua, how do you vote?
Yes.
All right. Sounds like we're doing both of those
That's
together.
consensus. That now
Yeah.
what that shows is that the things that we talked about last month or in May are the top concerns. I'm not willing to ignore the additional items that the administrator asked us to look at, but we're going to prioritize and we're going to take those top two first. So that kind of works out. We will find ways to get the word out to solicit public comment, not survey, but solicit public comments through our normal channels on those top two priorities. And we'll try and we will, as we receive public comment, we'll share that with the committee. We'll get that in your hands before the next meeting so that we can have a robust discussion at the next meeting.
Right, Bill, go ahead.
Yeah, Larry, just one recommendation. If the FSCAC staff, generates the comm messaging and shares that out in advance, we can then, as committee members, effectively use our platforms to amplify those messages just to make sure that, the communities that we're involved in are actively tracking and, facilitate broader, interaction.
Yeah, thank you, Bo. That's a great suggestion. That multiplies and amplifies the messaging, and it supports that comment that I made earlier about each of us as individuals. While we're working on a section of this work, we can reach out to and engage any sources and resources that we need to. So that supports that. I really do appreciate it. We'll work on the messaging, and I certainly invite committee members to use your channels to engage your respective communities and broader communities. I personally, when we get this messaging, I'll be putting it on my LinkedIn page for sure. So thank you all. Any additional comments, concerns?
Sorry.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to add, sorry, this is Bill from SCC, that it would be good to have some discussion or at least some transparency around how y'all are planning on going about that outreach, just so that we can steer that a little bit, and kind of do some brainstorming together. Again, we don't necessarily have to do it on this meeting given our time remaining, but certainly worth a discussion of what can be more effective for outreach, since at this point, again, we're not getting a lot of comments. So would welcome that discussion, or at least some transparency around what ideas y'all have on how we can improve that.
Great point, Bill. I mean, one thing, again, being relatively new to this committee, I certainly, the meeting we had in May had media coverage. We got some column inches on the fact that we had that meeting, the fact that there's new members on the committee. I will try and identify media members that took part in today's meeting, that have listened to today's meeting. And if they can express to their readers that the committee is looking for public comment, and we have a platform for public comment. We have a link for public comment. That would be helpful. That's one way. Then again, each of us, as we develop messaging, as the committee staff develops messaging, and gets that approved, if each of us could amplify that messaging. In my case, it would be my LinkedIn page, because I don't tweet and I don't have other social media interactions. Being a security guy, a lot of security people just aren't comfortable doing much on social media. LinkedIn was about the extent of it for me. But Bill, to your point, that's what one thing I want to do is try to use the media to amplify our message, and then each of us use our own social media channels not challenges, but channels to amplify that message and to solicit that public participation. Other ideas?
Respectfully, the column inches translate into a single comment after the May meeting. That's not driving the clicks for us. Social media is great, but again, having spent a lot of time in public outreach in this particular sort of arena, you have to meet people where they are. So I think we might want to target specific groups, community groups, action groups, networks, etc. There's a few, for lack of a better term, lobby groups that particularly work on these issues. There's mailing lists of the 3 PAOs. Those are the places I would expect that we should be soliciting from, not our own necessarily personal social networks. Although I guess those of you who work for 3 PAOs, it's a wonderful group to reach out to. You probably have all those followers on LinkedIn already. I don't. I think I offended them earlier. So just putting that out there, we should meet people where they are would be my strongest recommendation.
Good point. Mentioning that, and somebody did mention interest groups earlier. So things like ACT-IAC, Affirm, ATARC, those are the A's. There's probably a whole alphabet full of more, but those are great examples. Thank you, Bill. Other comments?
This is Kayla Hacker from HackerOne. I did just want to ask about for the next meeting, would the goal be for us to come prepared with our own thoughts of challenges that we should discuss and maybe solutions? Or is it more that we want to ingest the public comment first, have that brainstorming session where we throw things at the board, all of us, and then take that away to do formal writing? Or do we want to come to the table with individual formal writing? As draft, of course, none of it would be final.
I think, Kayla, I think the answer is yes. Each of us represents an equity and a community and a stakeholder in this committee. So I think that's a yes. We do come prepared with our proposals and drafts if necessary, but also prepared to listen to those to that public comment that we're going to solicit. So yeah. Additional comments, questions, concerns?
So if we're waiting on, sorry, Josh Gruger, Project Us, if we're waiting on guidance from you guys on what we're supposed to kind of release to get solicit this feedback from the public, should we maybe schedule the next meeting 4 weeks from the time we get that, so we have time to actually socialize it? I'm sure it's, not an overnight thing for that guidance, just to make sure there's, enough time for feedback.
Kayla?
My plan was just to share our already documented goals and like share that on through channels, through whatever, to help promote people making public comment versus waiting for, obviously, well, people can comment at any point, right? We don't have to wait for the meeting to be published. People could do that public comment at any point, right?
Yes, our public comment is available all the time. So they can provide public comments at any point in time whenever they choose to do so.
Okay.
So if there is an interest to try to drive people to our website to input their public comment, you can do that right away.
I would love for us to be able to meet not forever from now.
Yeah.
So we could, because we already know what we want people to comment on the challenges they experience with barrier to entries and the challenges that they experience with authorization processes. And And so I feel like if we get that message out sooner rather than later and we can get together, of course, having time to write our own thoughts and do our own research, I think is very important. So I liked that like 4 weeks window. But yeah, those are just my thoughts on like next timeline, next meeting windows.
And
Yeah, I totally.
we do need a minimum of six weeks in order to get the FRN published to actually be able to hold the meeting in accordance with the FSCA rules. So you know, we potentially could get more public feedback within the next couple of weeks, and then potentially schedule something out.
Josh, you have a hand up? Josh K?
Yeah, I just have, I guess, a question. I mean, I totally agree with Kayla. I want to get this information out there as soon as possible. But didn't we mention earlier that we're waiting for some, kind of official wording to solicit that feedback, or are we not doing that?
I think what the staff was going to try and develop a message, but the fact is, as Kayla pointed out, we have our priorities. We know the first two that we're going to be tackling. That's a matter of public record, and so communicating in your own capacity, under your own authority, and soliciting input or feedback to the public comment website. That you have a right to do that, so you don't have to wait for that.
Excellent. Okay, thank you.
I definitely want to thank everybody for an awesome meeting today. Great lively discussion. I appreciate the dedication that you're all bringing to this, and the focus. And so we do have our next steps clarified. I want to thank everybody for their input on clarifying those next steps and clarifying the priorities. And just again, for those who, Mike, for getting up early and joining us from the West Coast, and everybody else in time zones other than Eastern Standard Time, thank you all. And those of us in the East too, thank you for your participation today. Michelle, do you want to close us out?
All right, great. Thanks so much. The FSCAC staff will get to work drafting our draft meeting schedule and execute with you accordingly. Thank you all again for joining this early morning meeting. And with that, I will go ahead and adjourn this meeting at this time. Thank you all.
Thank you all.